You're listening to the Radius Church podcast, recorded live each Sunday in North Hollywood, California.
All right, so this is a conversation that took place in the early 1890s between two men in the city of Paris. And in this conversation, the first one says, "So you're telling me that when the bell rings, you just get up and answer it?" And then the second man in the conversation says, "Yeah, certainly." And so the first man then responds, "I see, just like a servant." Now, I'm not trying to tell a bad joke here. This was a real conversation, and the two men in this conversation were French Impressionist painters Edgar Degas and Jean-Louis Ferrand. And sorry for my horrible French, but this was a conversation the two of them were having, which was overheard by and recorded by one of their colleagues, who was Pierre-Auguste Renoir. The latest technological miracle that they're talking about, you might have guessed, is the telephone. And Ferrand prided himself as being one of the first people in the city who owned the telephone, and Degas, I suppose, prided himself as being one of the first people to tell him he should put it on airplane mode. We are wrapping up a series today, and the series has been an exploration of what is really brilliant and the possibilities that exist in the culture that most of us share, particularly our American culture, for those of you joining us in the States. But we're also wanting to be honest about the pressures and the challenges that are innate within that culture, the things that if we're not careful or we're not aware of them might shape our souls in ways that we don't want, we're not interested in. And I can't think of an example of something that represents the great possibilities and also could exploit our vulnerabilities as much as technology. And maybe even more specifically for us right now, the pervasiveness of the internet and our mutual development of AI. Now, you're not going to catch me being one of those people who critiques it or thinks that it's a horrible thing. I think we live in a magical age. I am so grateful for the presence of these technologies, because even during a pandemic and lockdown, we haven't had to stop reaching people and serving people and connecting with people. I mean, for virtually free, we can be anywhere in the world connecting with almost anybody that we want. I also won't be somebody to naysay technology because I frankly think it's futile. How many examples do we have from history of people who had no predictive power at all? They just critiqued things that were changing, and the world is going to be worse off because of this modern innovation. And doing that, taking that kind of a posture has proven to be absolutely futile. Like, critiquing technological advances is at best a temporary conversation, and at worst, it guarantees you are going to be one of the people left behind. I was talking with a friend of mine recently, and he said, any church or school or other institution that says that the internet does not matter for the future of its industry is kind of like a mall saying that Amazon doesn't matter. No, we understand that as technology advances, as innovations advance, there's going to be established industries that will die. Every industry will have to pivot. Some jobs will disappear and other jobs will show up and take their place. And people will be earning and progressing in some of these new careers at unequal rates with some of their predecessors. And I actually think that that's awesome. I think that's incredible. But whether it's obvious to us or not, or whether we're aware of it or not, this technology that we have shapes us. It shapes the way we relate with each other. It shapes the way we think and process information. I think it shapes our souls. I think we should ask the question, are we really becoming more enlightened as we progress, or are we just becoming more innovatively barbaric with each other? You've probably seen some doomsday documentaries like The Social Dilemma, or you've caught some podcasts like the New York Times' The Rabbit Hole. And whether or not you agree with all of their findings and conclusions, and frankly, their angles, I think that they give us a strong sense that innovation might be moving faster than our ability to civilize it. It's kind of hard to describe the comings and goings of our lives without the presence of interconnection and the presence of some of these AI technologies. And so if that's true, I wonder how we would describe our humanity detached from those technologies' influence on our humanity. In other words, who are we separate from the things that we invent? That's such a crucial conversation for us to have. It's such an important question to ask, because otherwise we won't know how to flip the script. We won't know how to maintain control over and use of these technologies without being, in ways we don't want, affected by or influenced or maybe even run by them. If we're going to maintain our posture, if we're going to maintain a productive relationship with our technology and our innovations, I think that we're going to have to face a temptation that humanity has always faced in every generation. We're going to have to overcome that so that we can explore the great beyond together without losing ourselves. Now, it might seem like a weird place to look, but I'm going to tell you a very, very old story, a story that you've either read for yourself or you've probably heard some version of. But even though this is a very ancient story, one of the oldest stories ever told, I am kind of humbled by the fact that the pressures that created this story are not obsolete. We have not upgraded our way beyond them. In fact, I think you might even be shocked to hear how progressive some of these pressures feel and how urgent some of these pressures feel. The challenge that exists in this old story is the same challenge that exists as we explore the great beyond together and as we care about the future of our souls. These are the pressures that we have to overcome. These are the pressures that we have to face if we're going to maintain a healthy relationship with our future together. So this old story is found in one of the oldest manuscripts that you can find. It's actually in the ancient Jewish text of Genesis, the very first installment of the scriptures that you'll encounter if you open up a Bible, and specifically in Genesis chapter 11. And here's how the story starts. Now, the whole world had one language and a common speech. And in the original language, they're not talking about the whole globe. They're saying in this whole area, everybody was speaking the same language and had the same culture. That makes sense. As people moved eastward, so as they expanded their territory, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. Now, if you saw Shinar today, you'd see that this is a big flat plain. There's not a lot of nuance to the horizon at all, just a big, wide, flat space. And so it would make sense that if they wanted to be found, they'd have to build up, because you'd look across the plain and you wouldn't be able to see the settlement or where are the humans unless they build some altitude to their settlement there. So they said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Why would the narrative slow down to describe the creation of bricks? This might seem like old news to us, but at the time, bricks would have been a huge technological advancement. And I know that you're aware of this, but as archaeology is proving to us, the engineering feats of the ancient world are still mind-boggling. And a lot of that was achieved because of innovations like this, of brick making. So that's what was happening at this time. So then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower," again, they have to be seen, "that reaches to the heavens so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Now, what they probably were creating at the time, this is what was being architected at the time, was something more like a ziggurat or like a pyramid. It's not so much like a tower, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa or something. And why is it that they wanted to create this thing? Well, on a practical level, like I said, so you can be seen. Somebody traveling across the plain can see there's a settlement there. Maybe I can find shelter there. Maybe I could find some resources there. But it said that their motive really underneath it all was something a little bit closer to home, at least for me. And I think it's written poetically into this narrative. It said they said to each other, "Let us make, let us build. Let's make a name for ourselves." Now, I heard this story when I was a little kid in Sunday school. And the impression that I got back then was that they were building a tower so they could reach God. They imagined God was somewhere up in the heavens and they had to build a tower to climb up and maybe shake his hand. But what's actually here in the original story is they weren't building a tower so they could reach God. They were building a tower to, in some ways, be gods. They needed power. And usually desperate attempts to build a sense of power are ways of regulating and mitigating something wrong way down deep inside that we're trying to overcome or mask. It said they were trying to make a name for themselves. Like people today, like I sometimes am tempted to try and make a name for myself, to scurry around and amass achievements, to make a name for myself, to be seen rising above the flat plane of humanity because I need to make a name for myself. And what is that? One way to understand it is, if I want to make a name for myself, what I want to achieve is when you hear my name, what comes to mind are things that I accomplished. Wow, in your industry, you really made a name for yourself. When I hear your name, I'm thinking about the breakthroughs that you that you created. I'm thinking about the achievements that you amassed. It's that age-old cry of the human heart that I need to stand out. I need to be about something. I need to be impressive. They wanted to make a name for themselves. And I don't know that they would have said that directly, that they really needed to be known for their achievements. I'm not sure they thought about it on that level. I don't know. But instead, they might have said things like, well, we need to do this because we have to have a sense of security. We're going into some uncharted territory. We need some safety here. So we need to look intimidating to people who may want to take advantage of us. Or maybe they might have said, we want alignment, right? So if we have something in the middle of town that represents our strength, and maybe people align around, we identify with these people. They might have said patriotism. We want to be able to point to this thing that we achieved and see, like, look what our nation has accomplished. And again, any desperate attempt to feel strong or even to feel godlike really masks some sort of a fear, a terror way down deep inside. And here you see it in the text because they said, if we don't do this, we'll be scattered. And that seemed like something they didn't want. They're afraid to be scattered. I don't know why. I don't know why that was so bad for them. Maybe they were afraid to be scattered because they were afraid to be exposed to something different than the way they already thought. Maybe they're afraid to be scattered because they're afraid to be attacked. We'll be out there on our own. I don't want to stick my neck out only to get my head chopped off. Or they were afraid to be scattered because they didn't want to be irrelevant. I move into new territory and now all of a sudden my skill set isn't in demand, or people don't know me. I don't have a reputation, and maybe I don't get to be an active part of that community. No, we need to really make sure that we shore up our resources, that we reinforce our core identity, that we stick with each other. But no matter how much you build, no matter how much you innovate, here's what's always been true of us: fear can't be made obsolete. You can't upgrade your way past it. We could figure out how to get all of us to Mars, and that's not going to put one additional inch between us and our deepest fears. Those fears are going to go right there with us. Now, as the story progresses, what's interesting is God responds. The author sort of represents God's response to this here, and God's the one that sounds scared, at least at first. The next sentence in the story goes like this: but the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. I just think it's fascinating that God was already in the place that they were trying to get to, and he decided to join them in the midst of their construction. The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then catch this, nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Now, I want you to understand that's not a critique. That is an awareness that God has. In fact, Jason Jaggard, who had an installation in this, or had one of the contributions of this series, I remember at one time he said to me, reflecting on this story, I wonder if we believe in our own capacity as much as God seems to. Man, if they're working together like this, nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. But God knew that what they were trying to do was really going to destroy their souls. They were trying to mask who they were down deep, maybe distract themselves from facing what was really going on underneath the surface. And so, as a response to this, listen how the story goes. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other. So just imagine how hard it would be for us to live out our capacity or to build this thing up if they all spoke a different language, came at things from a different culture. And so God does in the next sentence, the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building that one city. He scattered them. The very thing that they were afraid to do, he forces them to consider it. The very place they did not want to go, the very risk they didn't want to take, God made it impossible to avoid. And the story wraps up with this. That's why it was called Babel, which in our English, it sounds like the name of the place sounds like the result of the place. Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world, again, that region. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth, scattered them away from that region. Now, the question I ask, especially in a day and age like this, is if God is real, and I know you don't have to believe that, but just for the sake of the question, if God's real, and if God's powerful, God could do whatever God wants, and if God is good, why would God break up unity? Here's a bunch of people doing their best, accomplishing something together. Doesn't that sound like something a good God would want? So then it begs the question, is there a kind of unity, if God is good, is there a kind of unity that's bad? Is there a kind of unity that God will want to break up every chance God gets. God would want us to break up every chance we get if we want to pursue what is good and best and beautiful in our humanity. And I think the scriptures testify, I think our experience testifies that there is a kind of unity that's actually destructive. And usually it comes with an ism on the end. Classism, ageism, racism. I think homogeneity, that kind of unity that says, I'm going to build an impressive world with people who think like me, look like me, talk like me, believe like me, is the kind of unity that a good God would want to break up routinely. Because when that's the case, I think we're tempted to believe, even though we wouldn't say it this way, that we really are something God-like, that we are impervious, that we are right, and that we're really not what we truly are down deep, scared. I don't think it's much of a stretch to see how that ancient temptation is really a timeless temptation. How maybe that is the kind of thing we have to overcome if we're going to have a beautiful relationship with our inventions together, our innovation and our future. I think that's why this ancient story is still potent and why I come back to it every time I talk about technology. In every generation, there's a temptation to bolster our ranks with whatever tools are available to us. And it's just as easy now as it's ever been to do that. Here we are, live in this age where no matter what your conviction is or your current opinion is or your interests are, no matter how fringe or immature or ill-informed or toxic those convictions might be, you can absolutely find a community online forming around what you already think, forming around how you're already living. And then that community, it's easy to find them, they're going to reward how you already are and how you already understand your world by giving you more follows and more likes and more shares, just reinforcing how right you must be. And man, that is intoxicating. There's something so powerful about feeling right and then finding data around us to convince us of what we already believe is right. And so that's why we get our modern political discourse, right? Politicians have to stand out in an age when, listen, there's never been more people involved in public discourse around political ideas than there is now. There's never been more people voting than there are now. And so how do you stand out as a leader within that? And the truth is you got to simplify. In other words, in the vast plane of public discourse and of social media and of conversations and of opinions, you need to stand tall. We need to let people know where they can find what they already prefer to be true. So simplify your message, put a stake firmly in the ground on one side of the aisle or another, and then build a tower as high as you possibly can. I've shown this graph before when I've talked about politics and our social media conversations. This graph that you're seeing here charts the decisions of Congress over the last 40 years. And this chart is outdated. This only goes through 2014, so this doesn't even account for the polarization of the last few years. But you'll see here as congressional decisions have taken place over the last 40 years, they have systematically become more aggregated and polarized over time. And it kind of looks like a ziggurat, doesn't it? Quite honestly, it actually looks a little bit more like a chess piece. It looks a little bit more like a piece that can be easily moved around the game board by somebody who knows how to work the system and manipulate people. You either fall into this camp or this camp. You're either in this cultivated culture or this one. You're either this kind of right or this kind of right. And again, this isn't profound of me to say, but I do think that our technology has the chance, I think there is a chance for us to obliterate that kind of binary thinking, but I also think if we're not careful, it's just going to reinforce the polarization of our humanity. My real fear is not that our technology is going to make us robots. My real fear, I think the real danger to the American soul and maybe to your soul is that it would lead us to a day and age in which we live unexamined. We stop being curious. We stop exploring the territory beyond where we've settled. You know this. Again, this isn't profound. I'm certainly no technical maven at all, but I do understand that the technologies that we create and the AIs that we're shaping together as we engage online and engage through some of our smart tech, is not designed to form an opinion about what you think. That's not how it operates. Its sole job is to be predictive, to try based on your behavior and what you've clicked and what you've seen and what you've purchased and what you've typed, to try and predict what your next decision will most likely be and to make that next decision as easy as possible for you. That's its job. And what happens is it can shine an often really unflattering reflection back to us about what we are most likely to do and who we are most likely to associate with. And then it's wanting to reward, reinforce those repeated behaviors. That's how it works. And the reason that we may be, if we're not careful, unaware of how this calcifies us and polarizes us is maybe because we're just not interested right now in exploring who we really are in this moment. Our technology reflects back to us how we are operating in the world right now in ways that maybe we don't want to admit for ourselves. I think from the beginning, God's purpose for us was to fill the whole earth, to scatter, to explore, to discover, to be humbled by each other and by his creation. But if we continue to be operating from a sense of fear, then we're going to easily fall for the trap of these godlike capacities that we've invented for ourselves. I mean, think about it, right? With a swipe right now, you are omnipresent. With a swipe right now, you are omniscient. You know, the idea of being on demand, anything being on demand is such an omnipotent idea. I don't just want it. I don't just prefer it. I demand it. You know, I must have it now. But I don't think that's the problem. Please understand me. I don't think the availability of all this data and the possibilities at our fingertips, that's not the problem. I think the problem is how often we find ourselves existing within it. Like how much of our daily lives are spent existing in it. Our tech helps us escape from boredom, escape from space. And we want to escape from boredom for the reasons we've always wanted to escape from boredom and space, is because in those spaces, in that unstimulated space in our lives, we encounter something that we may not like, might make us uncomfortable. We encounter ourselves. If we're not building and creating and moving and watching and clicking, in that space that's left, we might come face to face with who we really are in this moment. And I wonder sometimes if the reason that people are increasingly living without some sense of faith, spiritual ideas, isn't because science has disproven it, it hasn't, but because the white noise that we fill our lives with removes the stillness in which our souls ask the biggest questions of life. I think our only hope to move forward innovatively, preserving our humanity, is to continually return to what differentiates the human from our godlike capacities that humans can create. Some of us are going to use those godlike abilities to just fortify our thinking and to make a name for ourselves, or convince ourselves that we're powerful, or convince ourselves that we're impervious, that we're not weak in some ways. I think we could use that. But I think many of us are going to choose, and I encourage you to choose the antidote to that. I'm going to suggest one, and this antidote is going to sound so silly at first, but I really think that this truly is the antidote to the delusion of godlike capacity, so that we can dream together and move together and innovate together without losing sight of who we are. The antidote to it is what we in this space call worship. That might have come out of left field for you. And I'm not just talking about singing. That might be what some of you are thinking. But I'm just saying the thing that you are already doing in some ways, the thing you're already doing to address the fear that you have by focusing on something you think is stronger, or something you think is more interesting. It's already where you're giving your highest attention to try and compensate for your biggest questions and your deepest fears. All of us do it. I mean, we run to our trophies to do it, or we run to our likes and our gadgets and our screens when we feel worthless, and when we feel alone, and when we feel confused, and when we feel restless. We are running to something that we think can eclipse it, can overtake it. And unless we are consumed by a vision of something greater than ourselves, I just don't think humanity can resist the urge to elevate itself. We have to become stronger than the thing we're scared of. I want to feel stronger, and I want to feel in control in the middle of a universe that won't let me. So what can we do? I believe, and I strongly suggest that you choose a habit of awe, to be enamored with, impressed by, humbled by the beauty, the innovation, the creation all around you that you played no part in creating. The creation and the wonder that you get to participate in, but you didn't manufacture. I remember when I was a kid, I went to SeaWorld a few times, and I know you're not supposed to do that anymore, but I had a blast when I was at SeaWorld. And I remember thinking when I would go to SeaWorld in San Diego, I'm from Southern California, I remember thinking that, man, that Shamu is adorable, right? Or whichever name, it was always called Shamu, but he or she, whichever generation of whale was in that big tank, we just always called that Shamu. And I remember thinking, like, that Shamu is so cute. You know, the Shamu would go up on that little ledge, and a kid would be feeding the Shamu and petting its nose. And I'm like, that's just so adorable. And then some of you remember this, you know, rolled forward a couple of years, and there was like this string of attacks. And it was almost like the world woke up to like, oh yeah, those are killer whales. Like, that's what they do. And it's for a moment because we had manufactured a way to put them in a show and cause this thing to sort of do our bidding, that we thought we had control over it. And we reduced it to something adorable to us. And I don't mean to get all Jurassic Park about this, but nature found a way to reveal where we are in the universe, and reveal that there is something more powerful than the things that we can create together. I think one of the reasons that the scriptures talk so much about worshiping the Lord, and the phrase that you'll often come across if you read the scriptures is fearing the Lord. And I think one of the reasons that comes up so much in spiritual conversation is because fearing the Lord right-sizes God. And I also think right-sizes us within God's reality, that as powerful as God is, he has decided to love us to death. God is not here for our entertainment. He's not here for our convenience. He's not here as our lucky rabbit's foot. God is the almighty God of creation. And we have a choice to restore our wonder and our awe and our respect of him. And if we do that, then we don't actually have to be afraid of anything else. We don't have to mitigate our fears with inadequate strength. So I encourage you to choose a habit of worship. There's this moment when Babel was reversed. And I think it only reinforces what this great God, the great adventure that this great God has designed us for. And some of you remember this. You've heard this. Centuries later, Jesus died. Hundreds of people reported seeing him alive again and reported seeing him ascend into heaven. And right after that, there's this moment in the historical record where those who were following Jesus reported being overwhelmed by God's Spirit, God's power. And it created this moment, this odd moment. And you could check a history book. This isn't just in the Bible. This odd moment where I think it reminds us of our purpose, where the disciples shared their life with Jesus. They testified to what it was like to experience Jesus to people of various languages and various cultures. And somehow all of those people understood, to the extent to where they took those stories and that experience home with them. And in that moment, people of different backgrounds and different tribes and different political persuasions were exposed to one great story that was meant for all of them. Not because God wanted them to homogenize, but because God wanted to show how he could reach anybody, anywhere, that he was truly the God of every tribe and every political persuasion and every tongue and every nation. And the result of moments like that was that people were not in awe of what people could do. People became enamored with what God could do, what God was capable of. Not an invention, not a church brand, not one ethnic group, not one gender, what God was capable of. And then what you see in the years that follow is the church leveraging every innovative approach available to them so that they could reach the left out and the kept out and the checked out. They were routinely becoming impressed with who God is, but also the great adventure that he had designed us for. So I want to call us back, for the sake of our American souls, I want to call us back to the habit, the helpful, informative habit of worship. I don't want us to ever be afraid of innovation, ever. Let's embrace it. Let's create the future together. Let's build something together. Let's go where no human could have imagined going before, but let us never let our deep fears close us off from our great God and from the beauty and diversity that exists with each other. Let's expand our horizons together. Let's consider how we may come together to build a great future together, because I still believe that nothing is impossible for us. God made it that way. Let me pray for you. God, thank you so much that you care more for our souls than we do. And where our souls are starved or they are blinded, you want to feed us and you want to illuminate for us. I love, God, that you've decided to plant us in this age, that we live here in this year with these possibilities at our fingertips. And to think of how far we could go, just seeing over the last 10 years, 20 years, how far we have come. It's exciting. It's exciting to think of the possibilities that exist in our future. But God, we have to remain aware, smart, so that we have a relationship with what we create, that God doesn't tell our souls that we are the creator, that we one day can finally innovate our way out of our humanity. God, I want to explore a future together, but only as we become more convinced of how powerful you are. Only as we become more confident about the purpose of our lives, to love each other, to tell people the greatest news that has ever been told, that this great God would decide to leave the place that we're all trying to get to when we're afraid, would leave that godlike place and come into the midst of our messy humanity, to see us for what we really are, to love us just like that, and to propel us out to live the great purpose you have for our lives. Jesus, thank you for loving us. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Thank you for listening. For more information, follow us on social media at Radius Church LA and visit us on the web at radius.la.